All right, we're recording.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. What I'm going to present today is basically simple steps, 4 steps that you're going to take, and you can actually use for 6 or 7 of the most common types of behaviors or dementia-related behaviors. So if you have a question as I'm talking, please interrupt me a million times if you need to. Because I want to make sure that what I'm doing and talking about is clear. So let's go to the first slide. Okay, so so we're going to talk about 4 specific kind of pillars or strategies that we use to address the different types of behavior problems. So some of the triggers, when we use the word triggers today, we're going to use it a couple of times, is we're talking about the things that we've identified tend to make the behavior changes kind of spike up, right? So pain and discomfort is kind of a trigger. Being overstimulated or being bored, that's also a trigger. Being fearful or feeling frustrated is also a trigger. Being in unfamiliar surroundings or doing complicated tasks, these are all triggers, right? Things that kind of exacerbate these behavioral changes that we're seeing with our loved ones as the disease progresses. So the 4 areas that I want you all to know, to keep in mind as we keep talking about specific symptoms or behavior changes, are these 4 things: to detect and connect, to address physical needs first, then to address the emotional needs, to identify them, right? And then to reassess and plan for the next time. So it's those 4 steps whenever you're encountered with a problem that you're gonna immediately jump on. Those 4 steps. You go to step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So what is detect and connect? What do we talk about when we say that? Basically, we're just saying that we need to meet the person where they're at. So we join the person in his or her reality by trying to see their world, or by trying to see the world in general through their eyes. We understand the person's reality and context before intervening, right? So we ask these questions: who, what, where, when, and how. And then, you know, what took place before that happened, during, and then after the behavior took place. You want to approach every person when you're trying to detect what's wrong and connect with them calmly, respectfully. That we'll talk about that because that's easier said than done. For anyone that's actually taking care of someone day to day, we're all human and we all get frustrated. And so, but we'll chat a little bit more about that. The second part that you're going to keep in mind. So the first one is, okay, something's wrong. This is a problem. This is a behavior problem. I'm going to detect, right, what's happening. I'm going to connect the dots. When did it start? Is it still going on? Did it end? And then we're going to jump into our first thing that we have to make sure of, right, to answer all of those questions. And that is to address the physical needs first. Because we understand our bodies really well, we're able to say, right, when something's wrong, we can say, you know, my arm hurts or my back hurts. But when you have dementia, your ability to have self-awareness kind of goes away a little bit. That includes not remembering your own thoughts sometimes, or things that have happened. So it's related to memory. But some of that also happens with your body, and something called prosopagnosia. And it's actually really weird, right, to say that perhaps someone has UTI, and most people would be able to explain that and say it. But because you have this weird thing called prosopagnosia, when you have dementia in the later stages, usually, then you're not able to verbalize when something's actually wrong. Something that you and I take for granted, that we are able to scream or say or verbalize when something's hurting. Our loved ones with dementia sometimes can't do that. So address the physical needs first, right? If there's any medical issues, let's address them. Physical problems, if they're hungry, are they thirsty? Did they have their breakfast, their lunch? Why would they be hungry again? Do they have diabetes? So maybe we can't jump into another meal, right? Or we need to be selective with the snacks and things like that. And so that would be something that we want to address first. Lack of social interaction. I know it doesn't feel like it's a physical illness or a physical need, but it is. Social interaction allows us something that's so important. Touch is important. We say it all the time. It's not like we stop feeling like we wanted a hug if we don't ask for it. It's something that's still there. And then the last thing would be environmental triggers, right, for discomfort. It might be too hot, it might be too cold, and I can't really say, so I might just walk around the apartment, trying to get myself feel more comfortable, and it could just be that they're cold. So all those things are physical needs that we need to address first. The second part to this is the emotional needs. So the emotional needs, this part is complicated because everyone is different, right? We've seen, and there are different types of dementia, not just Alzheimer's, right? That's why the Alzheimer's Association changed its name to Alzheimer's Association and other related dementias. There's frontotemporal dementia, there's Lewy body's dementia, and all of them have a very different pattern of presentation. So yeah, something that could be initially the first thing for frontotemporal dementia could be aggression, but it might not be the presentation of someone that has Alzheimer's. It might be apathy. It might be being disconnected or being a little bit more sad or depressed. So we want to address those needs and identify them, right? We detect, we connect, and then we cancel out possibilities from our physical needs. You know, are they cold? What's happening? And so if none of that is what is causing the behavior change, then we move on to the emotional needs and we address those. We're going to hear really quickly from Rose.
She was part of the family. You know, she'd fold towels, and she'd fold towels all day long some days. Just, you know, put them back in the basket, and then she'd give them to her, here's some more towels. And it may sound like it's cruel, but look, it kept her busy. It kept her movements going. It kept her, you know, just kept her occupied, and it made her feel wanted and that she was contributing. We created a routine for her that worked for her around her agitation and, you know, her sleep patterns. So every day she was in the same routine for the most part. And every day she did something. She was always in the kitchen every day helping do something. Sometimes she'd rinse dishes, but she was always near the kitchen sink because she spent most of her life in front of the kitchen sink. Now she was just doing it in different ways. And yeah, going for a walk, going out in the car for a drive, walking around the yard, you know, watering plants. Those are all things that she did, and we just had her continue doing them.
So routines are important, and I think we tell this to our children, right? We tell it to ourselves. We are, as adults that are functioning, we're constantly, you know, aware that habits and the routines of our day-to-day is what like gives us the ability to do what we do, to work and be productive and all of those things. Because you get dementia, that doesn't go away. The need to be organized, the need that there's something I have to do. There's something called prospective memory. Prospective memory is our ability to remember what we were supposed to be doing. That specifically, when you have Alzheimer's, kind of doesn't quite work. It doesn't mean that you don't feel the need to plan or the need to organize or the need to have a routine. And so routines are very important to address emotional needs and physical needs, but emotional needs tend to always be fixed or resolved a little bit when we inject routines into people's lives. And it's the same for someone that has Alzheimer's. So the last one would be to reassess and plan for next time. So we started with, okay, this is the needs that we have to detect and connect. I need to cancel out an emergency, right? I need to cancel out that this is now due to something that's medical that needs to be addressed. And so that's our first, we go to that one first and always. Then we move on to our emotional needs and we try to address those. And then when we finish that process of kind of problem solving, right? You get to this point of reassessing and planning for next time. You say, I didn't figure that out, that I need to go back to step one. Okay, let me go back and take a look at the problem. And then you cycle through that. It's like a little cycle that we use. And so you plan for your next time. And you do the same thing over and over and over. And that can get exhausting. That is a lot on the caregiver. It's why we're here. It's why what Dura and Lynn are doing is it's basically we know you're already doing that. And so what we're here to do is to support you. If you, it's basically our caregivers are problem solving day to day. And that's really, really hard. And so if you have any questions, I'm going to start talking about specific behaviors. But if you have a specific need that you have with your loved one, please bring it up. And I'm happy to address that one as we go along. So what we're going to do now
Heidi,
is
may I just interrupt very
yeah.
briefly? I just want to, because it is dementia we're dealing with, but I think it could apply to any other condition. I know it can with pain, is that what worked today may or may not work tomorrow. And that's just the way it is, because their mind, their body is changing constantly. Sometimes it's a plateau. Sometimes it's a, spike for the better, for the worse. And then, so just to keep that in mind, and that can help the family caregiver reduce frustration, because it can be frustrating. Like you said, we are human and we're humans first. So don't get frustrated, just try and try again. If plan A didn't work, then do plan B.
That's right.
Because it may work tomorrow.
That's right. That's why the Caregiving Cafe, like this environment is so important, because the thing that you don't realize is that by coming back here, you get a chance to talk to other people. As you're talking through your problem, someone else might have already been able to figure that out, right? And they can give you tips. And so, yeah, that's why this is so important. I'm glad that we're doing it.
And Heidi, just real quick, do you want people just to type their questions in the chat box as you're talking and then wait till the end, you may be addressing it, or do you want them just to unmute and go ahead and ask while you're presenting?
I think because it's just not that many of us, if you feel comfortable unmuting yourself and asking the question, go for it. But if you want to type it because you're, at a place where you really can't speak, please do. Yeah, either one would work.
Okay.
I'll be mindful of the chat. So how do you apply these these 4 strategies to any behavior? And like Dura mentioned, this goes beyond just dementia. So something like anxiety or agitation, how can we address that? So restlessness or pacing, right? Oops, sorry. Restlessness or pacing is how it usually looks. When you see a loved one that is anxious, usually they're pacing around. Usually you see that they went to the kitchen, they didn't really get anything, came back to sit down in the couch. Maybe they go to the bedroom, they don't come back with anything. And so that level of restlessness and moving around is a sign of distress. That is a sign of anxiety. And from that level of anxiety and distress leads to also agitation, which is a little bit more intrusive sometimes for caregivers day to day. It can be scary if our loved one was never maybe aggressive, right? And so that is one of the things that we're gonna address. So for anxiety, we're gonna keep in mind the same steps. Why is this person feeling anxious? And we're going to our detect and connect, which is basically, identifying the little things that they're doing day to day. The what, the who, the where is it happening? Is it only happening when we go to someone's house? Is it only happening when I leave the house in the mornings? Is it happening during lunchtime? That is detect and connect. So when is this problem happening? What are the circumstances surrounding it? The second one would be, are they hurt? Is something wrong with their health? Are they pacing around because they actually have like an ache and they have pain and they're in some form of discomfort? The best way to find that out is to ask them, because something that you can't help, even though someone with dementia might have problems verbalizing what they're thinking, they can answer a question with a simple yes and no, right? It's easier for them to say, wait, oh, okay, maybe that's what's happening, right? And you're redirecting their thought by asking questions. And so always ask questions about what are those physical needs that could be causing this anxiety. And then we move on to the emotional needs. And we talked about how, feeling sad and feeling frustrated and fearful is a way to explain things like agitation and anxiety. If you are, and I've had this question come up during this slide specifically. I had someone say, whenever we go to our like a birthday, like a family gathering or a holiday, we've realized that we don't enjoy it anymore because, they just walk around. We don't know if he's, going to leave the house. It's not like he can just sit and enjoy. Everyone, wants to cater to them. And it's like they're just very agitated. And so being in a situation where you're actually not really aware what's happening can be really frightening. And so feeling scared is one of the biggest things that is happening to our loved ones. Being fearful, it might look like anxiety, and it might not be anxiety. It might mean that they're actually scared, that they're fearful of their situation, their surrounding. And so perhaps it's time to just limit those holiday parties to the smaller ones, to a birthday. Perhaps they now need to happen at home, and you need to be hosting, which is a lot. I come a Latino family, I can tell you, my mom did not do that while taking care of my grandmother. She just decided that it was no longer time for perhaps to go to the big ones. And so that's how that kind of was resolved. And so there's all of these things connect with one another, but always there's the right process to follow, which is detect, connect, address what's wrong physically, ask yourselves, what are the emotional needs, what's the context in which it's happening, and then you reassess and you plan for next time. Confusion and suspicion, which is not recognizing our loved ones, familiar people, going to the grocery we've been going for the last 10, 15 years, not being able to find things there, accusing other people of stealing their money, infidelity. That one's quite common, actually, that their money being very paranoid, right? Confusion or suspicion can look like paranoia. And we call it paranoia, but I actually have to correct people that paranoia is very intentional, right? And we're not talking about someone that's schizophrenic or someone that has other mental health conditions. It's someone that's actually confused because they're no longer able to keep track of where things have gone, or why this is no longer what I'm allowed to do. It's my credit card. It's always been my credit card. That concept doesn't disappear, right? And so why are you now interested in my credit card? I would also be suspicious if my family try to grab my credit card or no longer allow me to use it. Infidelity could be also one of those things that kind of happen. You know, if you are actually putting that in context, think about it like that. If you no longer recognize your loved one, if you're not recognizing, right, the affection, or if you're not recognizing that connection that you have, which is an affection that you have with the loved one, that does cause some distrust in the relationship, and that's natural. It's just for someone with dementia, they're not able to realize the context in which it's happening. And so yeah, these are all normal things that happen with someone that has dementia, if you understand where they're coming from. We do the same thing. We're gonna detect and connect. So what would be specifically something that you could do? So if someone's confused, an example, we could use ants, but I like that I've done this presentation a million times, so I have plenty of examples now. So if we're thinking of confusion or suspicion, and we're gonna detect and connect, I have a specific example. I work with a family, and they were trying to get their dad to basically give them their credit cards. The dad was not happy. He was basically the CEO of his own company for a really long period of time, and of his home. He was the CEO of his home financially, and he was the one paying all the bills. And then suddenly you're being told that you can't do that. They had to, you know, protect their loved one, and so they went to a lawyer, and they did all of that, and they made sure that legally he was protected. But then how do you rip out a credit card or a checkbook from someone's hands, or they know they have that? I think the way that they figure that out is first, you know, to do it in a kind way. The emotional needs, right? We still need to consider. There's no reason why we're making people more angry. There's no reason to cause that. And so what they were able to figure out is they could get a credit card where they could, because they still couldn't get on the bank to put them as the account holder until all the legal documents went through, and that's a long process. And so they found that there's some credit cards that you give kids where you can track transactions, and you can put a hold on the transactions. And there's actually credit cards for seniors as well, and for this kind of situation. So they found one, and that was it. That worked. I think they were able to convince his dad that this one had better rates, better interest rates, that they would have access to the credit card in case they wanted to start helping. They said they would be helping. So the way that they did it was very kind. So when it comes to confusion or suspicion and things like this, I understand that it is frustrating, but you want to do any change at taking into account the emotional needs, and making sure that, you know, you always do it in a kind way. You do it with love, and you do it firm, but with love. Aggressive behaviors are also something that, you know, I think this is one of the hardest things that I've had a couple of phone calls in the last couple of weeks where they couldn't really move their loved one into, or they was scared because of COVID to place them in a facility, but it was time that was getting aggressive with his wife, their mom, and they knew that that had to be done. That was delayed, and then you know, there was an unfortunate circumstance where, you know, he was chasing his mom, and they had put cameras around the home, so they saw it when it was happening. They were able to get there quickly, and they, you know, and they learned from that lesson. So what I want to say is, aggressive behavior, either it's verbal or physical, can be very real for a caregiver. And I know that I have daughters and siblings in here, family members, and so I think when it comes to aggressive behaviors, you have to safeguard the caregiver. Our caregivers are our number one priority, as much as the person living with dementia. And so what I would say with this is, yes, you're going to detect and connect. You're going to follow your steps to identify aggression. But when it comes time to act, you have to make sure that the safety of the person, not just the patient, right, but of the caregiver is met. When it comes to aggression, I always remind this, it's really, really contraindicated to use antipsychotics with dementia patients. I feel like there's laws that are passing now so that we're not doing that. But because I do see it happening, I want to mention that medication is specifically for aggressive behaviors. The things that normally we would use, sedatives and things like that, are technically contraindicated, but you can always ask your doctor. There's ways and there are medications that they can find that might be able to help, but usually it's something that we address with behavior changes. We have to detect, why is this person getting angry? How do we not trigger that anger? What are the triggers that are throwing that off? Is it because we're confronting them with the truth they don't want to hear, but in our minds we think they need to hear? Perhaps we don't have to do that. That might not be the best way to go. Is it because they're angry because they're very uncomfortable? They have like urinary tract infection, or are they having some arrhythmia? You know, are they physically okay, and so their reaction is out of pain? We address that. Is it an emotional need? Yeah, if I grab someone's credit card from their hand without no verbalizing, no explanation, just abruptly, right, I would expect that they probably are not going to like that. There's no reason. They don't understand why you're doing that. Always talk through your problems with your loved one. And yeah, you de-escalate situations constantly. With someone that has dementia, you try to not put truth in their faces, is a way to just simply state it. You caress the truth. You know, white lies are okay. White lies are fine. We're going to hear again from Rose.
On the tough days, my husband and I would switch off. And my mom had forgotten all her English and had gone back to speaking only Greek. So she just spoke Greek, and my husband doesn't speak Greek, so it was perfect. So when she was agitated and she was cussing and yelling and saying all kinds of obnoxious things, my husband couldn't understand. So to him, it didn't matter. So when she was in that mode, we'd switch off, and he'd take her for a drive. She'd stare out the window, eat fries, and she'd be fine. And it would give me a break to really decompress from some of the stuff she was saying, that I know she was just saying them, their words, but I'm a human being as well, and I was taking them personally.
And yeah, we all take words personally. Let me rephrase that. We all take hurtful words personally when they're towards us. That's actually normal, and completely, there's always a history that has been there with those relationships that we've had. And I've seen couples, and I've seen from caregivers say, we haven't had the best relationship over the years, and so everything feels just a little bit bigger, heavier. The words carry more, and that's fair. That's absolutely fair. And so when you get to a point like that, when you feel like it's too much to handle, right? It's okay to give another person, or find another place for your loved one. It's okay to take care of yourself. I think we have to remind our caregivers that a lot more. And so some of the things that we usually see when it comes to aggressive behaviors is that usually, they can get dangerous. Most of the time they're upsetting. So the example I gave her, someone was chasing this person. It was a dangerous situation. It depends on the dementia type, right? When it comes to frontal temporal dementia, there's a lot of aggressive behaviors that are not associated to Alzheimer's. And so aggressive behaviors are just upsetting. in someone that has Alzheimer's most of the time. And so that danger that they're posing to someone else, they're also posing to themselves. And so what we had to tell this family specifically, and they were at one of our conferences, and actually they spoke about this, was that they were concerned that the cops were going to be called. And when they show up, they don't know that this person has dementia, that this is not their usual self, that they actually don't have an intention of harm. They're just very reactionary. And so I remember they called their local police department, and you can notify them so that they write that this person is someone that's living with dementia. At that time, even when they called the police, I advised them to identify first that that person had dementia, and that this was an abrupt outburst, more than to use the word aggressive when they made that phone call, because they weren't close to the house, and so they needed to get home. Someone needed to get there so that they could protect both of them, really. And so, yeah, speak to your doctor, mention it, especially aggression. There are changes that are happening with the disease process. Sometimes changes in your heart rate and things related to your heart can trigger a lot of aggression. And so you want to make sure that that's not what's happening, that that's something that you cancel out. And of course, call 911. Repetition is something that we've also heard can be cumbersome, and it's when you say things over and over and over. And there really isn't a magical way, right, to say how you deal with your loved one's repetition. But we're going to hear from Sam.
Repetition is really one of the most common and also frustrating behaviors for caregivers. It's important to really just take a minute, take a breath, and really think about how you could help that person with the answer that they're looking for. It really makes no sense to sort of bump heads with them and try to correct them or try to tell them to stop asking it, because they really can't remember that they just asked you that a minute ago. So thinking about how you could provide an answer that's reassuring, even though you might be doing it over and over and over again.
So yes, you can provide an answer that is reassuring, right? White lies are okay sometimes, but it gets to the point where I've had caregivers mention, you know, I this is how I've said it, and then I said it again, and then I said it again, and I have to say, you know, they have done it perfectly, but it's still something they want fixed, or it's still something they're just exhausted about. And I have a caregiver who went through we have a chat, so you can chat with other caregivers. It's like a blog chat kind of thing, where you can ask a question and other people will answer. We also have one that's for people that have been diagnosed with dementia. And I think they were scrolling through that, and someone was trying to, you know, make them feel better about their frustration, that everything they've done and how they've addressed the issue was done fine, but the person was still super frustrated about it, and they wanted to see if there was something else they could do. And at the end of the day, this person answered back, and they said, you know, it's going to end. It's not going to last forever. As the disease progresses, their ability to speak it kind of withers away, and so they're not going to repeat themselves for long periods of time. It's a stage, and like any stages, that stage ends, and it's going to be a different place where their loved one is at. And in some weird ways, this person took a deep breath, and they said, that was for me powerful to hear, because I needed to hear that it's okay, it's going to end, even though it's very bittersweet. Yeah. Our last one is just to talk about wandering and wandering behaviors. About 60% of people with dementia will wander. 60% is a lot. It's a lot. It's actually a really high number. And it can actually happen at the beginning, at the middle, or the end. And the reason why that is, depending on what kind of dementia type is. With Alzheimer's, your body, if you had a healthy body, and I'll mention my grandmother, when she was diagnosed, my grandmother was diagnosed 19 years ago. She's been living for a really long time. She had better health than my mom, and that most of her daughters. She was intact, no heart disease, no arthritis. She was in such good health when she was diagnosed, other than just having her memory problems. And so, yeah, she was able to move and wander around. So the reason that we have memory care facilities is because of that. They are on lockdown. The person can, their mobility is okay. And so for some people, this is a concern, not just at the beginning stage, but also at the later stages. And we'll hear from Beverly.
Later in this journey, and I call it a journey, he decided that he was going home to his wife. And one New Year's Eve, he looked out the window and there was a house down the street that had all the lights on, and he decided that that was his house. And it must have been, I'd say, at least 2 below zero. And he was going to leave. I had a double lock on the door, but I had left the key in, and he decided he was leaving. And I said, well, Amos, I'm your wife. No, you're not. My wife is waiting for me. And he would laugh when I said that I was his wife. So he got up and I said, Amos, I'm going to call the police if you walk out the door. And Amos, in his usual manner, said, you do what you have to do. And he walked out the door. Well, he walked out in his house shoes 2 blocks down the street, and I got in the car and drove around. It just so happened that it was a neighbor's mother, and she knew what was happening, and she talked to him, and we got him back in the car and drove him home.
A good tip for when you're concerned about wandering is, talk to your neighbors, go around and let them know what's happening. Most of the times, they haven't gone that far, unless they have the keys to a car, which you want to take away quite soon, really after diagnosis. And then you want to keep somewhere where they can't find them. They're usually around in their area. And so you might, if you feel comfortable, you might want to go and let them know that this is something that you've been struggling with, or something that might happen, and notify your neighbors. My mom did that with my grandmother. She was the most social person ever. And that was when we knew it was time to place her in a care facility. And she would just go say hi to everyone at every home, and she would want to go in and stay in and eat with them. And and she had already had her lunch, but she was just bored. So something to keep in mind when it comes to wandering is a reaction to what the need might be, specifically boredom, right? So what detecting, why are they leaving the house? Well, they're bored. They're not in there's no physical needs there, other than, yes, their social isolation. Their emotional needs would be that, they're in a little bit of distress, maybe a little bit anxious. And so how am I gonna plan for next time? The next time I know I have to add a routine to their schedule. It seems to happen only during sundowning or only after lunch, where they usually get a little bit more energy from food. And so maybe I need to add an activity to that. And that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
That was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was really wonderful. Thank you, Heidi. I was just going to ask a quick question regarding the wandering. I had heard, and I'm going to throw in wandering inside the house as well. Sometimes they just they're looking for things. And my mother would walk around, and I discovered she had gone into my daughter's closet because we have a Jack and Jill bathroom. So her room connected via the bathroom to my daughter's closet. And I had no idea till afterwards, you know, and because she would walk out wearing my daughter's dresses, party dresses. Like, oh, okay, I know where you've been. So somebody said to me that they were looking for home when they were, you know, they look like they're looking for something, but they may not really be, you know. So you know, I mean, it didn't bother me, but sometimes, you know, a family caregiver might get a little like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about that, wandering inside
Yeah.
the house?
So the reason why we have our loved ones wandering around the home, pacing around, is they have this little thing that we all have that we take for granted. You know how sometimes you can't go to bed, right? You can't really shut your eyes because you have like a to-do list in your mind, and you're like, oh my God, did I finish that? Did I complete this? Did I do the other thing? What do I have to do tomorrow morning? I'll start with this thing tomorrow morning. Oh, I have to do this in the afternoon. That level of thinking, it's very much an adult that is a functional adult. And someone that has dementia, they're no longer functional adults in certain ways, right? They were for years and years, decades. They were very active. They were participant in life. It's something that doesn't go away. The need to have purpose. That need, which is an emotional need to have purpose, doesn't disappear with dementia. It doesn't go away when we get Alzheimer's. That's actually even a different part of our brain that the deceased person probably hasn't even reached, even though we can't really remember what they feel like that. I can't remember why I feel this sense of like, I'm supposed to, you know, have purpose tomorrow, or I have a duty to something. I can't remember what it is, but there's something. And so perhaps if I wander around, perhaps if I grab my purse and I look through it, it's a way for them to get triggered, right? Or to find cues, things that cue their memory. And it's such an incredible thing, the way that our brain tries to compensate. And they're trying to touch things to see if that somehow cues this sense of purpose, or thing that they think they should be able to do, or maybe need to do, or they forgot. And it's that rehearsal of information, of recollection, that they're just stuck in. And it's your brain and your body fighting that forgetting. It's fighting losing your sense of purpose. And so the best way to mitigate that is to give them purpose. You're gonna make the sandwiches. I'm gonna hand over and put the bread, put everything right in the counter. You're gonna help me make the sandwiches for the kids. I need your help. I actually need your help. I need your help in the garden. I need your help going with me for a walk, you know, like I need to exercise. Purpose is what we need to inject in creative ways back into their lives. And I see that there was a question on the chat about chewing. I'm wondering if they mean chewing, they're having a hard time chewing food, perhaps. I'm not sure if that's what it means, but if you want to type in a little bit more on the chat. But when it comes to chewing, like any difficulty with chewing, it could be, it would be very rare to see that early on in Alzheimer's. But yeah, depending on what type of dementia, even our ability to, and this is going to be, you know, silly, but we forget that we learned how to ride a bike. We forget, you know, that we learned how to brush our hair, chewing our teeth, like brushing our teeth, chewing food, even things like that. These are all called ideomotor apraxias. And so that might be a sign of that, but let me see. I see that you guys, that I have a little bit more. Okay. during the later stages. I'm not answer that call. Okay, okay. Oxygen tubing later in the AL stages. That's a hard one. That's if it's kind of like if it's turning to like an OCD type of behavior, it's a hard one to redirect. I would say the best person to talk about what you can do is the actual nurse that's doing that. That means that maybe that's not, that would be hard to take away too. I don't know. I don't know if you have like a suggestion, Lynn or Dura, about that.
Initially, I was thinking like like there was an issue with swallowing, so I was going to suggest OT and a swallow test. But then reading the chewing on things, that's challenging.
That one's challenging.
Maybe
you know,
something for her teeth. Maybe she has oral. I would have her teeth checked. Oral care. Does something hurt in there? Something sensitive?
Right.
When you have teething
right.
babies, you give them something to chew. It feels good.
Right. Let's go back to the steps. Here's where we detect and connect. Why is this chewing happening? The first thing is make sure that, the nurse and the docs know that that's happening, so they can troubleshoot any physical problem that might be happening. Because there could be something, could be as simple as a cavity. It could be things that like are actually concerning, and we want to address those first. So first step would be ask the doctors if they can figure that, if there might be something motor, with their motor aspect of their mouth and teeth, and even their swallowing, like Dura mentioned, swallowing can't become difficult at the later stages. But if it's a tick, if it's more of a, my guess is usually that these behaviors that happen like that, something like that, I've had people say that they are picking their hair, and they've picked a lot of their hair, they are very OCD-like symptoms. And those, the best way to address those is to, sometimes it's even putting something in their hand so they can't do it, things like that. And it's restriction of movement. If it's causing a problem with an actual medical device they're using, that's scary. I wouldn't want that to be happening. And so it might be that we need to find a different way, a different machine, a different way to provide that oxygen. That's a hard one with what you're saying, but I think we can figure it out. The first thing would be the person that can help you troubleshoot that would be your RN, your nurse, and then it doesn't hurt to add an OT, physical therapist, or OT specifically, and even a speech language therapist, a speech pathologist. But the first thing to do is, don't sit on that problem, because if it's interfering with their medical treatment, that one would be concerning. So make sure you just raise that up to the team that's taking care of her.
And also maybe have a thing of things you can replace. So like the children's chew when they're teething or something like that you can keep refrigerated. It's kind of cool and it feels good to the touch. Maybe frozen, some sort of frozen fruit or something like that when you start to see that, instead of saying no, don't do that, something you can replace that with, which will then occupy kind of that thought process for a while. Because saying no doesn't work when you have in fact, it increases the agitation.
And what you don't want to do for something like that is to, I think this is what we're trying to say, that's why address physical needs first is the first thing, is to like say that all of these things are part of just the mind is creating them, or it's a mind problem, it's they have Alzheimer's. It could very well be a physical problem that needs to be addressed. It could be simple as a cavity, something that is medical. So that would be my first place to go to.
Mm-hmm. The one other thing I just remembered, when I was growing up, my friend would bite her nails. So her mother had her dip her fingers in like hot pepper, cayenne or something like that. She stopped chewing her nails, biting her nails. So I wonder if you can put something that is not toxic but unpalatable, some maybe tasting bitter. Because I mean, if she's chewing on her O2 tube, I mean, like you said, that's serious. You know, she needs the oxygen. You know, and it would be difficult to get O2 other than if she's getting it with a tube. She must be using a cannula. My husband's using that. He needs the oxygen. So unless it's a mask, she might chew on that too. He actually uses a mask too. So, but maybe something to deter, or the quilt, maybe can you spray something bitter on it? And like, she might not like that, you know, I don't know. But anyway, just a wild and crazy idea.
And just so you know, if you go to what we have here is the Alzheimer's, we have the Community Resource Finder, is to find these kinds of presentations are happening weekly, or ALS Connected. So ALS Connected is that blog, that chat room, and there are people that are very active caregivers are constantly, you know, answering questions or trying to, you know, say, oh, that happened to my mom and it was this. My God. I know we ask Google everything all the time. So ALS Connected is just another place to do that, but you'll have, Google cannot respond to us all the time. And ALS Connected can actually have that. You can have another caregiver reply to your message and say, oh, this is what I think, you know, was happening with my mom, and this is what we did. And so it's just a cool place to visit.
Thank you. Could you put that in the chat?
Yes. I actually sent.
Share that.
What I actually did is I sent information survey. You just put it. You don't even have to put your email. I think we made it like that. You put your name and then you select what you want me to share with you, and I'll if it's you want to know about the ALS Connected, I'll just send you that when we're all done. Okay. If it's, you know, if it's that you want this PowerPoint presentation, since I know you guys might be sharing this with your family, and sometimes they can't really follow along video or something like that, I can send it in the presentation in a, you know, as a PDF document. But just make sure you put your information on that that link I sent like when I first joined, so it's all the way at the top.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn.
Okay, there you go. All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Heidi. That was really enlightening and really great. And even if we know some of the things, it's always good to bring it front and forward in our mind, because we have to remember so many things, you know, like sometimes it gets buried back there. So thank you. That was really helpful. I want to